What's going on, guys? Welcome to my Dungeon Arcanist tank build. This is a bit of a first for me in creating these build videos, so bear with me. The video will be part of a series where I'm hoping to bring also a DK Dungeon tank build, a Necro, a Warden, possibly others. I'm also going to do my trial tank builds as well that I've been using in recent trifectas. So there will be a Godslayer 1, a Dawnbringer 1. I'll probably do Griffin Heart and IR as well, maybe a TikTok. And further to that, I'm also going to hopefully do in the near future some sort of how to tank guides for the various trials as well. The builds and the tank guides will be aimed at hopefully all levels, so not just those doing the trifectas, but those hoping to dip their toes into the hard mode for the first time, or even the regular veteran content. So there's quite a lot coming. If that sounds of interest to you or useful to you, then please do support me by subscribing to the channel. You can also like my videos and feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions for me or want to propose an idea for another build or guide video. So that's enough for the intro, let's get into the video. So the Arcanist has been out for a few months now, came out with the Necron patch. It's personally become one of my favourite classes to tank on. I just think it's really good as a tank for a number of different reasons. First of all, it's very easy to get to the resistance cap and get a lot of good damage mitigation on top of that. Secondly, its sustain is really good, like comparable or beyond the other classes in my opinion. So health, mag and stam all really easy to maintain at a good level. The buffs that it has access to are also really good, and also probably most importantly it's fun to play as well, which no one's going to want to play it if it's boring to play on. So overall, I think it's a really good class to tank on. This is the setup that I've been running in quite a lot of dungeon content. So I've been running it in trifectas, in a lot of the hard modes, and it works really well. So starting off with race, I am a red guard. I've chosen red guard because I find that the stamina sustain is probably the weakest of the three, the mag, the health and the stam. So I've chosen the red guard. Red guard gets you reduced cost of weapon abilities, you get the 2k max stam, and then you also get a bit of stamina sustain as well. Every time you deal damage, you can apply that every 5 seconds to give you a little bit of stamina back. Other races that are really good include Nord for the extra resistances, or ulti regen as well. You can go Breton if you want to focus more on the mag sustain. You can go Imperial, that's a really good sort of all-round sustain choice. Same with Argonian, but you rely more on using pots for your sustain. Ultimately, you can realistically use any race that you have. So even if you're a DD and you've got a dark elf or a high elf, like you can just turn that into a tank if you really want to. My second choice for race would probably be the Imperial if you're not going to go with the red guard. Ultimately, whatever class you choose, you just have to balance things. So for instance, if you're a Nord, you'll take some resistances out somewhere else, so you'll lose a couple of reinforced pieces or maybe a CP, just as an example, but you just have to balance it whichever race that you do decide to go with. So next is the Mundus stone. I'm choosing the Atronach. This is pretty standard. I almost always use the Atronach on whichever tank I run with. There are exceptions where I won't, but for the most part this will always be my choice. So that's the Mundus we're running. In terms of food, you've got a couple of different options here. You can either go with Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which are going to give you the max resources in health, stam and mag, and it'll also give you the health recovery as well. So that's the first option if you want to go with max resources. It's a little bit safer. It's personally what I choose. The other option is you go with either Jewels of Misrule or Ozorga's Smoked Bear Hunch. They're both basically the same. The only difference is the Smoked Bear Hunch has a little bit extra max health, and it also gives you that element of health recovery, whereas Jewels of Misrule is purely just max health, but a little bit lower, and it'll also give you the stam and mag recovery. So these foods are based more on giving you kind of max sustain instead of the max resources. You have to really try both and find which one works best for you. There's not really a right or wrong one to pick. I, as I say, personally choose Bewitched Sugar Skulls. I like having the max resources. It is a little bit safer, and it's just my preference, honestly. In terms of pots, we are going to be running tri-stat pots. You can either use the crown tri-stat pots that you get from the daily rewards, or you can use the player crafted ones. You can either craft these yourself. I will put up on screen the ingredients that you need in order to make these. You can also buy them at Guild Trader, but if you do, just make sure you buy them at CP level 150, and also check that they are the right ones, because there are a lot of different Essence of Health potions. Moving on to the gear, so the gear that you run is really going to depend on how your group is set up, you know, whether you've got a healer, whether you haven't, what sets they're running. We personally run with a healer, and this is a setup that we go with. So we're running the Vateshran Perfected Sword and Board on the front bar. What this is going to do is every time you use the skill Reverberating Bash, you're going to pull in the adds. So essentially you're using it for add pulls in order to stack them properly. On other classes you'll run the melee taunt pierce armor, which will allow you to run the Master's Sword and Board. However, on an Arcanist we run Runic Sunder as our main taunt, which is the class taunt, which means the Master's Sword and Board is not really going to do anything for us. So that's why we're choosing Vateshran. So whenever you deal damage with Power Bash, you're going to apply Call of the Void to yourself for 2 seconds, and then enemies within 12 meters are immediately pulled into you. So like I say, it's basically being used to stack up the adds on the add pulls. When it comes to bosses, you're not really going to want to use this much. So what you can do is you can actually swap out Vateshran Sword and Board for Maelstrom. The Maelstrom is also another 2-piece front bar set, but what that does instead is, instead of using Void Bash, it's using the low slash skill to give you sustain. So when you're in a boss fight, what you'll do is you'll use your low slash, and then when you heavy attack after that, it's going to give you your resources back. So you can swap that to bosses. If you're lazy, feel free to just keep running Void Bash, or you can just double bar like your other sets that you're running if you don't really want to use the Void Bash set. It is a bit hit and miss, to be honest. Sometimes I'll run just Silver Leash to pull things in, because the distance on the Vateshran Sword and Board isn't great. But give it a go. It does work quite well. And like I say, try swapping out into the Maelstrom Sword and Board for bosses. So the first 5-piece set we're running is Powerful Assault. This is a really nice dungeon tank set to run. Basically, whenever you cast an assault ability in combat, you're going to give weapon and spell damage to your DDs. So it's essentially just a nice burst damage skill to be running. By running this set, you're just going to give them that extra burst damage. It's quite nice. Then we're going to pair that with Turning Tide. This is option 1. There are quite a number of options that you can run, and I'll list them in the description of this video. The other one that we quite often use is Drake's Rush instead of Turning Tide. But with Turning Tide, it's whenever you block, you get Flowing Water, and then what happens is you then bash, and you're going to apply Major Vulnerability to anyone kind of in front of you. That Major Vulnerability is obviously really nice, and that's why we're running that. But Drake's Rush, again, is another very nice one to replace it with. And the difference is that that's going to give more ulti regen. And we're pairing the Turning Tide with Archdruid. It's given the same buff as Turning Tide, so we're giving Major Vulnerability, but this is procced from doing heavy attacks. So what you're going to want to try and do is proc your Turning Tide, watch out for the Major Vulnerability dropping off, and then between that, you cast your heavy attacks and you apply Major Vulnerability again via the Archdruid Monster Set. So they're the sets that we're running. Again, I will list some different sets that you can run. There's quite a lot of alternatives, and I will list those in the description on the video. Moving on to the traits and item enchants for the gear. So I'm running Decisive and Absorb Stamina enchantment on my front bar. You can go infused on the front bar as well. Sometimes I will if I want to increase the effect of the enchantment, but usually in dungeons I'm going to go Decisive, just to give myself a little bit more ulti regen, and the Absorb Stamina is nice as well. On the Vateshran shield I have Sturdy with a tri-stack glyph. You can go Divines as well. I've got Infused Crusher on the back bar Ice Staff, which is pretty standard. That's just going to help you to apply your Crusher enchant, which is reducing the resistances of whatever you're applying it to, thereby helping you to reach the pen cap. I've got Divines and Tri-Stack Glyph on the mask. I'm basically balancing my Reinforced, Divines and Sturdy. I've got, I think, 3 reinforced in total, and that's basically just allowing me to reach my resistance cap, essentially. I will show that a little bit later on, but it's just allowing me to get to that resistance cap. And then the Divines is going to increase the effects of my Mundus Stone, which is the Atronach. So it's given me a little bit of mag recovery. And then the sturdy pieces that I'm running, they're basically stopping me from taking so much of a hit to my stam sustain while I'm blocking. So I balance those in that way. You can go sort of 4 reinforced, 4 Divines, which works quite well, or just feel free to balance it between sturdy Divines and reinforced to get what you need. I'm running tri-stack glyphs on all the big pieces, and I'm running health glyphs on the small pieces. You're probably better off going tri-stack glyphs on all, if I'm honest. If you've got plenty of cash, then go ahead and do that. It's just going to give you more max resources on everything as opposed to just health, but otherwise works absolutely fine. And then on my jewellery, I'm running tri-stat glyphs on this powerful assault set, and I'm running infused. You can go harmony, but in dungeons I don't find that you're getting as many synergies, so for that reason I just stick with infused. And yeah, in this particular case I'm balancing a tri-stat glyph on all 3 of my jewellery pieces. You can go mag recovery as well. Again, this is going to come down to your preference and how you find your stamina being balanced. But for dungeons, I go with the tri-stack glyphs, as I find that just works a little bit better for me. I'm also running 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium, and that's allowing me to benefit from the passives from the armor skill trees. And just to show my resistances, so when I buff and I apply my melee taunt, you can see my resistances are just around the 33k mark, so the cap's 33,100. I'm slightly over on the front bar for spell resistance, slightly under on physical, and I'm getting that balance from 3 reinforced pieces. Your priority of reinforced, you want to go chest number 1. If you're only going 1 reinforced, put it on the chest. If you're going for a second, put it on the legs. 3rd on the feet, 4th on the head. And you don't really want to run any more than 4 because you should be at the cap by that point. So I'm only running 3. I'm slightly below the resistance cap on the back bar. That's absolutely fine for dungeons, even for some trials. You're not going to take too much damage, so that's absolutely fine. And again, outside of reinforced, just put a combination of divines or sturdy, depending on whether you feel you're struggling more for stam sustain or mag sustain. So in terms of CP, I'm running pretty standard blue tank CP. I don't really change away from this like ever, to be honest. There's very sort of exceptional circumstances where I might vary it slightly, but for 99% of the time this is the blue tank CP that I will run. So I'm going with Ironclad first of all, which is going to give me a damage reduction on direct damage attacks. Then I'm going with Endure and Resolve, which is reducing my damage over time. Then I take Duelist Rebuff, which is reducing my single target attack damage. And then finally Unassailable, which is reducing the damage I take from AoEs. In terms of the red CP, this is going to depend really on the content that you're doing. The 2 at the bottom, Boundless Vitality and Fortified, I'm pretty much running all the time to give me my max health and again to balance me with my resistance cap. Bastion is a really nice one to run because well, on an Arcanist you're using your damage shields quite a lot, which we'll get to on the skills, but this is basically buffing that, so it's a really nice one to run. Then you can run either Expert Evasion if you need to roll dodge a lot in a particular dungeon. You can use Ward Master if you just need a bit more tankiness. It just reduces the damage you take while you're blocking and have your damage shield on. You can also go with Shield Master, which is just going to reduce the cost of them a little bit more, so it will help your sustain slightly. And then Celerity is also quite a nice sort of general one to use just to speed up your mobility in certain fights. So that kind of last 1 or 2, they're going to depend more on the content that you're doing. So finally, moving on to the skills, this will be kind of the last section of the video. So Reverberating Bash, as I mentioned before, we're using this to proc our Vateshran Sword and Board, our Void Bash set. We can swap it to low slash on bosses because we don't need to use the Reverberating Bash, Void Bash set on the bosses, we probably benefit more from having the sustain from the Maelstrom. You can also swap that out for Silver Leash, which is what I do quite a lot of the time, just to pull in ads that are further away. Most of the time I actually prefer doing that. I find Void Bash is a little bit hit and miss. Zinnas Empowering Disc, this is a really nice Arcanist specific skill. It's giving us minor courage, which is the Yolna buff, the buff you get from the Yolna Kryn 5-piece armor set. It also gives us minor fortitude, minor intellect, minor endurance, so we get all the recoveries as well. You want to try and place this when you're on a boss or in an ad pull, and for the most part, hopefully your DDs and healer can be inside that ring. Next is Rune Guard of Stillwaters. This is one that's going to give you your minor resolves. This is going to give you about 3k of your resistances, so it's going to help you go to that resistance cap. It's also going to give you 2 other very nice benefits. First of all, minor protection for 20 seconds when you use it, and then also if you take damage when you're below 50% health, the minor protection gets consumed and it gives you about a 13k heal, which is also very nice. So this is a kind of must run on a tank. Then you're going to get your main burst heal and damage shield from Impervious Rune Ward. What this is going to do is whenever you cast it, you get a huge damage shield first of all, which will absorb about 33.5k damage on my tooltip, and then it also absorbs another 16.5k damage for 5 seconds if the shield persists. The shields do scale off your max health, so very nice for a tank. And then also when you take damage while you've got that shield on, you consume the shield and it heals you for about 4.5k for each crux that you spend. So if you've got all 3 crux up at the time, you're going to get like a 13k burst heal, which is also really nice with the damage shield there. So this is again like a must run on the Arcanist tank. And then finally you've got your front bar taunt. As I said before, you're not running Pierce Armor really on an Arcanist like you do on the other tank classes. Because you have this one, which is better, to be honest. It's going to give you some resistances whenever you apply the taunt, and you're also maiming them as well. So when you taunt them, you basically steal armor from them, which is going to help you again get to that resistance cap, which is all taken into account when we're sort of working that out. So it's a must run, definitely better than running Pierce Armor in my opinion. And then the front bar ulti that we're running is Replenishing Barrier. Most of the time we're not going to be using this, maybe in like a kind of desperate moment, but for the most part we're running it on the front bar so that we can get the Magicka Aid passive. So this is going to give us about 10% mag recovery while it's slotted on the front bar. So it's generally what you're going to run on the front bar for a tank, to be honest. Then on the back bar we're going with Blockade of Frost. This is pretty standard for a tank. We're running this to proc our Crusher enchant, which we showed on the gear earlier on. So we're going to try and keep this down all the time just to keep up our Crusher enchant on the boss that we're fighting. Next we have Razor Caltrops. We're using this as our main source of major breach. On an Arcanist, because we're not running that Pierce Armor front taunt that we'd normally run on another class, we're not major breaching them. So that's why we're running this Caltrops. You can swap this out for Ellie Drain on bosses. I personally don't, only do that if you're struggling with sustain. Your Cruxweaver armor is how we're then applying our minor breach. So while we have this on, every time something damages us, we are putting minor breach onto it. And this is also our main source of major resolve. So this is where we get our 6k bulk resistances. So this is a really important one, and it also finally is also generating our crux for us. So it's doing 3 kind of really big benefits, and it's a must run. And also try to keep this up all the time, because if you don't have it up, you're going to take more damage. The next skill is Echo and Vigor. Now the reason I'm running this is because I'm running Powerful Assault. So if you're not running Powerful Assault, then obviously you don't need to run the Vigor. And it's important that because the Powerful Assault is backbarred, so I have it on my ice staff and jewellery, that means that you have to put the Echo and Vigor skill on your back bar as well, otherwise it won't proc. It's also going to give a little gradual heal over time to your DDs and healer, or DDs if you don't have a healer. And then finally Frost Clench. this is just our range taunt. You can run Inner Rage as well. We don't really need the major maim that much, but it is nice to have. But yeah, otherwise just run the Inner Rage. As you can see, I don't really run it very often on my Arcanist at all. I haven't even got it morphed, so Frost Clench works just fine. Take your pick. And then finally, our ulti on the back bar is going to be Warhorn. Aggressive Warhorn is going to give us max resources to ourselves and to our allies as well. And we're also going to get the Major Force buff as well, which is really important on a tank. There's a couple of other ultimates that are definitely worth noting. So Vitalizing Glyphic is a really nice one. When you drop this on the ground, kind of like PA, you're going to give a burst damage to all of your DDs. It basically puts something down on the ground. They do damage to it, your DDs, and by doing that, they're going to get this kind of big burst of weapon and spell damage, so it's very nice to run. You can also swap out Xenas Empowering Ring for Rune of Colourless Pool. We in our group have an Arcanist DD that runs Rune of Colourless Pool, but it's definitely one that you want to have in your group because it gives minor vulnerability and minor brittle. You don't necessarily have to drop Xenas Empowering Disc for it, because that is also another nice buff, but if you have, I don't know, an Arcanist Healer or another Arcanist DD, they could also run Xenas Empowering Grasp as well. But they are both two skills that you want to try and have in your group, so try and have Xenas and try and have Rune of Colourless Pool as much as possible. Both are really nice. And then, just like I mentioned before, you don't need to run Reverberating Bash necessarily if you don't want to run that set. So you could always put Rune of Colourless Pool there as well if you really wanted to. And in that case, you obviously wouldn't run Vateshran Sword and Board. You would run probably like, you would just double bar your other set as another alternative. You can also get rid of Reverberating Bash for Silver Leash, which I mentioned earlier on in the video. I do normally run this, and as I said before, it's really just because Reverberating Bash on the Void Bash set, it doesn't pull things in from that far away, whereas Silver Leash has got a much better range, and also you can just control it a little bit better. So that's probably my preference overall. And the final thing that I haven't shown yet is the attributes. I'll show this last because I generally will do this last when I'm making a build. So I'll get all my armour on, I'll put my food on, make sure the glyphs are correct and everything, and then I'll do that. I had 55 into health and 9 into mag. So you have to look at your sets. So on PA, for instance, you get 1 line of health, you get 1 line of stamina. And then on Turning Tide, we're going to get 2 lines of health and 1 line of stamina. So by putting those sets on, we can see where our sort of baseline is for health. I'm then aiming for around about over 40k health usually. So I'll put my attributes into health to achieve that. In the case of this build, I've gone to about 43k health, and I've used the 9 just to top up my magicka so that I'm just over 20k mag, and that gives me a nice balance. I'm pretty happy with that. So guys, thank you for watching the video. Like I said, this is going to be part of a series, so there will be more videos coming out shortly. I'm going to get them out kind of as soon as I can, but I will be doing them for the other classes for dungeons, and I will be doing my trial builds as well. So please keep an eye out. Please support me by subscribing. You will have a button pop up towards the end of the video with my avatar. Just click that to subscribe. Or if you're not watching on a phone, I think you can also click my little button down in the bottom right of the screen as well. Otherwise, just visit my channel. Leave a like on the video, and please leave a comment as well. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions or you want me to go through anything else, then please do leave a comment and I'll do my best to do that. But yeah, thanks very much for watching. Hope it's been useful, and I'll see you in the next one.